Welcome to part 2 of the latest podcast from the Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards and Alex Stanczyk, presented by Physical Gold Fund.
And Alex, of course, you watch all this and the markets, the equity and bond markets, through the lens of physical gold. And looking back on recent events, how do you see what's been happening?
Sure. I've got a couple of views on this, and one is that I'd just like to remind everybody listening to the discussion is that, there are times where gold moves quite a bit, and sometimes people get a little concerned about the price, but I would remind people that the prices that we see are prices based upon currency crosses versus gold. And what I mean by that is that gold doesn't do anything. I saw this article the other day. It was a news article, and the headline said, "Trump loves gold, but gold doesn't love Trump." And I thought to myself, that is really one of the dumbest headlines I think I've ever heard, because gold doesn't love anybody. It's an inert material. It doesn't have a sort of a fancy for certain things. And my point is that gold is just gold. And now a troy ounce of gold is a troy ounce of gold now, and it will be 1,000 years from now. It will be in the United States or in Germany or in any other country. It doesn't matter. It doesn't move and it doesn't go anywhere and it doesn't do anything. It just is. So when you're seeing prices expressed in US dollars for gold or British pounds or euros, really what you're seeing is fluctuations in those currency values against gold. So listening to what Jim was saying, I think he's totally right. I think that the words I would use to describe the situation is temporarily over-optimistic. And from my view, equities and the US dollar have been getting much stronger, but for all the reasons Jim mentioned and possibly a couple more. So you've got this narrative going on about how the US economy is going into the future. But we have to also look around the world, and combined with sort of the turbulence that we're seeing in the EU right now and around the world, this is all contributing to US dollar strength. So these moves really are all US dollar strength based. And there's a lot of things that push on the price of gold. And on occasion, the US dollar has sort of the strongest push, and that's exactly what's been happening. Even in the last 2 days, the US dollar is up strongly, while every major currency in the world, including gold, is down versus the dollar. So if you back it up even further, if you go back to the beginning of October, gold in US dollar terms was doing great. But if you lined up a 2-month chart of US dollar next to gold, you would see the pattern there is extremely obvious. The US dollar has been getting stronger and gold's been getting weaker. But the interesting thing is that US treasuries have been moving almost lockstep with gold. And so has the euro, JPY, the British pound, Swiss franc. These are all moving inverse to the US dollar. So what this tells us is that currencies around the world are actually just repositioning versus the dollar. And the US gold price is a direct reflection of this. So I concur with what Jim says when the dollar weakens from this current strengthening cycle, and it has to. If it keeps getting stronger like this, we're going to be looking at serious emerging market crises. And it's got to reverse. And what I think is going to happen is as much of this starts to reverse, a lot of these things are also going to go in the other direction.
Well, thanks, Alex. Jim, I'd like to ask you just a brief thought about one other aspect of this election drama we've just lived through. Donald Trump campaigned as the champion of an unheard working class against the corruptions of the political and financial elite. Now, when you look at his cabinet choices, which assemble the wealthiest cabinet in US history, and you look at his plans to reduce banking regulations, and you look at the continued reign of Goldman Sachs at the Treasury, can you actually see any daylight between Trump and the elites? And what do these hiring decisions mean for the markets looking forward?
Well, I actually can see some daylight, John, and I'm not as tough on this with regard to Trump as some of his critics or even some of his supporters. I think your question is probably more aimed at Trump's supporters. Are they disappointed or upset at some of these appointments? And do they feel, it's the same old, and, it's like that song by The Who, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, won't get fooled again. But I view it a little bit differently. First of all, I'm impressed with the caliber of the talent. So independent of the pedigree or where people worked once upon a time in their career, I think Trump is picking extremely talented smart people, competent people for the cabinet. Now, I know that, Gary Cohn is moving from chief operating officer of Goldman Sachs to head of the National Economic Council, which is a very powerful job. You're actually in the White House. The National Economic Council is part of the senior staff of the White House. You have the ear of the president. When the president goes to G20, for example, it's the National Economic Council and the head of it who prepare his briefings and his positions on things like whether it's currency wars or bailout versus bail-in, et cetera. And also just directing economic policy in general. So of course, he was mentioned the chief operating officer of Goldman Sachs, probably the president's closest advisor outside of his children and son-in-law is Steve Bannon, who at one time worked at Goldman Sachs. And the Secretary of the Treasury is Steve Mnuchin, who also worked at Goldman Sachs. So you say, wait a second, isn't this a Goldman Sachs government? And I think the answer is, yeah, they may have worked there. Cohn's different. He actually is, he's Goldman Sachs to his DNA. But the other two, Bannon and Mnuchin, they worked there for part of their careers, but they moved on. Goldman, a lot of people come and go. Not everyone's there for life. You certainly get some great training. You build a great network. You get some skills, but you see them. Bannon went on, had a big career in Hollywood. He started doing media deals. He started his own investment bank, did media deals as an investment banker, made a ton of money he bought the rights to Seinfeld, the comedy show, and he bought it in, I think, after the first season, but it wasn't a big hit in the first season. Then he stepped in and bought the show. And then, of course, I guess it was the most popular TV show of the 1990s. Made a lot of money there. And Mnuchin also went out on his own as a private equity deal maker and bought some banks and made a lot of money that way. So, look, they're super talented guys. They made a ton of money. They're Wall Streeters, however you want to define it. But I don't really think of them as part of a deep, dark Goldman Sachs conspiracy where one firm controls the government. Look, Goldman Sachs is full of Republicans and Democrats. They do have a finger in every pie. I will say, everywhere you turn, you'll find a Goldman Sachs alumni. But, Neil Kashkari is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, worked there. Again, Bob Rubin, Secretary of the Treasury during the Democratic Clinton administration, Hank Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury during the Republican Bush administration, were both former heads of Goldman Sachs. They tend to be everywhere, but, they tend to be quite talented. There are Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals. So I don't see Goldman Sachs as this homogeneous, malevolent force, particularly if you haven't been there your whole career. Cohen has, so he's maybe a little bit different category. But the others, they were there for a while, but they did a lot else in their career. So I view it as really more a question of talented. When I talk about the global elites, and that's the subtitle of my new book, it's called The Road to Ruin, the Global Elite's Secret Plan for the Next Financial Crisis. When I talk about global elites, I'm really not talking about CEOs and bankers. I'm talking about policymakers. I'm talking about people like Christine Lagarde and David Lipton at the IMF, or Michael Froman, now the U.S. Trade Representative, formerly on the National Economic Council, or central bankers like Mario Draghi or Janet Yellen, or academics like Larry Summers or Ken Rogoff, or public intellectuals like Adair Turner and Anatol Kolesky. Those are the people that I mean, or I refer to when I use the phrase global elites, because they're actually running the system, running the international monetary system. Institutions like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, the Financial Stability Board, Sherpas in the G20 process, central bankers, finance ministers. That's the group that I'm talking about specifically. They're the ones who are advocating the SDR, who are getting ready for the next financial crisis. So, investment bankers are, they're important. They play an important role, but I really think of them as more about talent. And I think Trump is getting some very good talent. I get some very good advice. So I don't quite buy into the Goldman Sachs conspiracy theory. It's a powerful institution. It has a lot of problems. As far as Goldman Sachs itself as a company, what they do, that bears watching. But I think the individuals, you have to take them one at a time. As far as his other appointments, you got, as Donald Trump, as President-elect Trump would say, I've got my generals. General Flynn at the National Security Council, General Mattis at the Pentagon, and others. who are getting various appointments in the intelligence community and other roles. They've talked about General Petraeus as perhaps having a role, Admiral Rogers, maybe for Director of National Intelligence. Not all these appointments have been announced or not all these seats have been filled yet, but he's really relying on military people. And just a word there, I've been privileged to have a lot of exposure to the military, particularly senior officers, working with, majors and colonels and generals. I met a few 4-star generals, but I work closely with 2-star and 3-star generals, brigadiers and major generals and lieutenant generals. And man, you would have a hard time finding a smarter group of individuals. I've worked with Wall Streeters, I've worked with Nobel Prize winners, I've worked with PhDs and academics, and I've worked with the military. And our senior military officers, I'm talking about the top tier. These men and women, they've got PhDs, they speak 5 languages, they've got 2 master's degrees, they've got all that education, plus they've been, on active duty in 5 continents. When you're an area commander, you run one, Central Command or Africa Command or European Command, you're like a super ambassador. You deal with your peers, you deal with heads of state, you deal with ministers of defense and other senior cabinet officials, CEOs in the places you go. So they're super competent, but they also have a culture. The military culture is, can do, never complain, get it done, mobilize whatever resources you need. They don't make excuses between each other. They have a very direct, very blunt style. That's kind of military culture. There's a lot to admire there. So, people like Wilbur Ross, I've met Wilbur Ross a few times, very nice guy, looks super successful, super shrewd deal maker. So I look around at this cabinet, I see is not a group of elites. Look, I guess if you're a billionaire and you belong to certain clubs, you're part of the elite, but I define it a little more narrowly. My definition of elites really runs to like-minded people using really bad economic models to run the financial system off a cliff. But as far as the others are concerned, I'm looking at the Trump cabinet. What I see actually is a lot of talent, a lot of smart people, and I don't see the conspiracy that some others see. So it's nice fodder for the websites and the people who like to use, what do they call Goldman Sachs? The vampire squid. I guess that was Matt Taibbi, Rolling Stone, came up with that phrase. I don't quite, Goldman's a powerful institution. I have no illusions about it. They do have a finger in every pie, but I don't quite buy the vampire squid theory, and I don't think it's a conspiracy, and I think he's got some very talented people.
Well, thanks, Jim. And in particular, that's a very helpful distinction you made about how precisely you're defining the financial elites. And now, Alex, I'm sure you have many questions from our listeners. We've got a little time left, and let's use it to hear those questions.
Okay, sounds great. So we did have a lot more material planned for this discussion, including the situation that's going on in India. And I'm just going to very, very briefly touch on that. For those of you who don't know, there was a demonetization that was declared on November 8th by India's prime minister. It has created a tremendous amount of turmoil. The country uses almost 98% of its transactions are done in cash. So this has been a huge issue. We referred to this in previous discussions as the war on cash, and it's sort of morphed now into the war on gold over there. We don't have time to dive too deeply into that at all, but just be aware that it is happening. And we'll try to cover it more in depth, maybe if it's still an issue in the next podcast. But we've got a bunch of really great questions right now.
Alex, I'm sorry. If I could just interrupt for 30 seconds,
Sure.
And I hope we do cover it in the next podcast. You're absolutely right about India, but this thing is spreading faster than I can keep track of. We after that, we had a demonetization in Venezuela. They declared the 100 Bolivar note no longer legal tender. Demonetization is a fancy word for your money is not money anymore. A president or head of state or prime minister wakes up and says, your money is not money anymore. It happened in India. It happened in Venezuela. It's now being proposed in Australia. It came up yesterday that Australia may abolish the $100 note, the 100 Australian dollar note. So this is bouncing around from country to country. It's going way beyond India, although India is the most egregious case. So let's make a note. That is a good one for the next podcast.
Yep, absolutely. And we talked about it the last time. We were saying that this is not these are not isolated cases. This is all part of a larger sort of plan. And this is not a big conspiracy theory or anything like that. I mean, Jim's talked extensively about it. It's all documented. We know from the last G20 meetings sort of the initiative there. And the end result that they're trying to get everybody into is basically digital accounts into no cash. So it's easier to control. But moving on to our questions, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of really good ones. The first one is coming from a gentleman by the name of Chris M., if I'm not mistaken. I believe he's from the UK. His question is, it starts out with a little bit of a preface in that in the U.S. confiscation scheme, for example, FDIC is in place to compensate small savers with money in banks. In the U.K., financial services compensation scheme is the equivalent, and it's likely to be raised to £85,000 soon. His questions are, isn't it possible that in the event of a systemic banking crisis, worse than 2008, for example, that the UK government, saddled with public debt of 90% to GDP, might not be in a position to honor these promises to compensate savers? And there's a second part to it. May the only courses of action be a partial payout and bail-ins in order to sort of salvage the situation?
Well, I would start by saying anything's possible. So I'm not going to take any scenario you want. I'm not going to say it can't happen. Too many weird things have been happening. But the official bail-in blueprint, we don't have to guess about what a bail-in is. The G20 told us that November 2014, Brisbane, Australia, G20 meeting, working papers, they had a blueprint for what a bail-in is. So it doesn't mean they can honor it in every case, but we know what it is. They do intend to honor the insured deposit. Now, any amount in excess of the insurance is absolutely at risk. So I don't know every limit in every country. I know for the European Monetary Union, it's 100,000 euros. In the United States, it's $250,000. I take it from Chris's question that in the UK, it's somewhere south of 85,000 pounds, which I guess would be roughly equivalent to $100,000. So the amounts vary, but it is the intention of the G20 to protect you to that extent. But a lot of people have more than that. It doesn't mean you're super rich. People say, well, gee, if you have $500,000 in the bank or €500,000 in the bank, doesn't that make you rich? Well, maybe, but you could also be a business person. That could be your working capital. You could be a car dealer. You could be a restaurant operator. You might have that much in working capital to meet a payroll. It doesn't mean it's all the money's in the bank, but it doesn't mean it's all your personal net worth. It could be there to satisfy, accounts payable or payroll or working capital or any other thing you would have in a business. And that money is at risk in the event that that particular bank becomes the subject of a bail-in. The intention would be to take amounts in excess of the insured amount, convert it into equity in the new bank, bearing in mind that the equity in the old bank got wiped out. The bail-in playbook's pretty simple. Equity goes to zero. Deposits in excess of the insured amount can be converted into anything they want, including equity in the new bank. So you involuntarily go from being a depositor to being a stockholder. Bondholders take a haircut. Haircut just means you don't get 100 cents on the dollar. You might get whatever. You might get 40 cents or 60 cents, whatever it takes to fill the hole in the balance sheet. That's how much the bonds will get haircut. And all of that happens before any government money is used. Now, as for the insured amount, could the government be in a position where they can't honor the obligation? That shouldn't happen because they can always print the money. The question really is, what's the money worth? In other words, I might pay you your 85,000 pounds, but if I have to print the money to do it, the purchasing power might be worth half. So I'll give you all the nominal money, but you might discover that it's not worth as much as you think.
Okay, very good. So we're very tight on time, but there's still a couple of really good questions. If we could ask you to stay maybe 5 minutes over time, Jim, and maybe quickly address some of these and make a 3-minute or a 5-minute clip for each one. Before I jump into them, just really quick hello to Susan K. She's asking when will the gold price bottom. We talked a little bit about that before, and that probably December, January, February timeframe, if you're looking at gold, might be a good window. So the questions here, there's two of them. One is from Robert O. His question, Jim, is if the world's currency cash holders have lost the war on cash, how do you expect those much fewer gold owners to be able to win the war on gold? Would it be wise, in your opinion, to join in on this? He calls it a losing proposition.
Well, I hear this a lot in different forms, and people say, I hear you, Jim and Alex, and I understand gold preserves wealth, and it will protect me against inflation and also protect me against, the war on cash and all that. But what good will it do me if the government's just going to come and take my gold? When I hear that, I really think of it as kind of an excuse by somebody who doesn't really want to own gold to begin with, and they're just looking for reasons to justify that. But here's the point. And a lot of people go back to 1933, and I've certainly written about this. So what happened in 1933 in the United States? President Roosevelt by executive order, made gold illegal in the hands of U.S. citizens. He made it contraband, like drugs or smuggled goods. He said everyone had to hand in their gold, and if you didn't, you could go to jail. And there were $100,000 fines, or equivalent of $100,000 in today's dollars. You can actually go to jail. So that's always referred to as the Great Gold Confiscation. And wouldn't they just do it again? Well, there's a little bit of nuance there. That is what happened. But when you handed in your gold, you got $20 an ounce. That was the price of gold at the time. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says the government can take your property, but if they do, they have to give you just compensation. That's what the Fifth Amendment says. So most people are familiar, if the government's putting through a highway, and they're like, sorry, we've got to put the highway through, your farm because that's where the road goes. So we're taking your land by eminent domain, but we'll give you a check for the value of the land. The government can do that. The government can take your gold anytime they want, but they have to pay you for it. They can't just, come in and break down your door and seize it. That would be a violation of the Constitution. I don't know what the law in India is. Maybe they can break your door down and seize it for tax evasion, but not in the United States. But Roosevelt did give you your $20 an ounce. But he was sneaky because he knew, that is, President Roosevelt knew, that he intended to raise the price of gold by, in effect, devaluing the dollar, which he did. He took it from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce, which was a 75% increase in the price of gold, if you want to think of it that way, or, inversely, a 40% devaluation of the dollar. I've always called it a confiscation because he didn't know exactly 35 at the time. He ended up there, but he was thinking, I'm just going to raise the price of gold until I get some inflation, which he eventually did. So if you know that the price is going up and you force people to sell it to you at $20 an ounce, but you know secretly that you're going to raise the price, that's a form of theft. It's just dishonesty. He wasn't honest with the American people. So that's why I call it a confiscation. But in fact, just for the record, you did get $20 an ounce. The problem is you didn't get $35 an ounce, which is where he ultimately took it. So that was the deception. That's what was wrong with that. But the $20 an ounce did fulfill the requirements of the Constitution of the Fifth Amendment because you got just compensation. That's because we were on a gold standard, and that's what the price of gold was. Now, imagine the same thing today. The government is so desperate they want to come and get your gold. Well, they've got to pay you for it. They could do it. I'm not ruling it out, but they've got to pay you for it. But there's a big difference. Today, we are not on a gold standard. The price of gold can be whatever it can be. It can go down, it can go up. There is no fixed price of $20 an ounce or even, $1,000 an ounce. So imagine the world where the government is going to do this. The world in which the government is so desperate that they want to confiscate all the gold is a world that's already out of control. It's a world where the price of gold is probably well on its way to $10,000 an ounce. And so to confiscate the gold today, consistent with the Fifth Amendment, because there's not a fixed price, they can't do the bait and switch that Roosevelt did. They'd have to pay you the market price. And it's extremely likely that the market price in that state of the world would be, well above $5,000 an ounce. So if you buy your gold at, $1,100, $1,200 an ounce and the government takes it at $5,000, I would say mission accomplished. At least you got your $5,000. Now that's an extreme scenario. I don't see it happening, but it certainly could happen. But the difference between then and now is the government would have to pay the market price. And since we're not on a gold standard, it would be something more like a true market price, probably much, much higher than it is today.
Yeah, I can also add to that for our international listeners, because I know we have oftentimes as much as 50% of our audience is international. We have a wide range of people from different walks of life, from professionals, doctors, attorneys, airline pilots, to people who run money professionally, fund managers, etc., all over the world. One of the things I can tell you from our background in gold and our experience in dealing with this over decades is that the way multi-generational wealth is preserved many times is not just by diversification, but by jurisdictional diversification. We call it multi-jurisdictional diversification. And what that means is if the gold is in places not just in your own jurisdiction, but spread out across several jurisdictions, if you've got extreme events that are happening in any one particular jurisdiction, the question must be asked, if you have wealth that's preserved from generation to generation to generation, we're talking over a span of 100, maybe more years. Inevitably, in any jurisdiction, there are wars, there's economic turmoil, perhaps there's drastic changes in government. And so how is wealth preserved? Well, the answer is that they don't put all their eggs in one basket jurisdictionally, so to speak. So that's just another area perhaps to think about and take a look at. So, Jim, if you have time, I know we're over just a little bit, but there's one really important question I think that people need to know an answer to. And this is coming from Bradley W. And I'm going to very briefly summarize this question. He says he attends all our podcasts. He's read all of your books. He's a subscriber to your various newsletters. He listens to most of your interviews. His one nagging question, and I suspect he's not the only one that's worrying about that, is if he holds maybe 10% of his portfolio in gold and there is a systemic lockdown, sort of like what you've been speaking about, then how does he convert his gold to something of value? I mean, what are the options at that point, and what are your views on that?
Well, he doesn't have to convert his gold to something of value because it's already in something of value. The gold itself is valuable. That would be, of every scenario I can think of, that would be the one where I would most want the gold. In a scenario where, you can kind of buy and sell freely, or, sell an asset, get dollars for it, turn the dollars into euros, move the money around, the system's working, the infrastructure's up. Gold will do everything it's supposed to do, and the dollar price of gold could go a lot higher, will go a lot higher, based on a declining dollar. Alex, you asked earlier, I think one of the listeners was sort of getting at, what's the bottom for gold? The bottom for gold is the top of the dollar. When the dollar peaks, that's the lowest dollar price for gold. That's all it is. It's a seesaw. One is the inverse of the other. Yep. So if you say, what's the low dollar price for gold? I'm going to say, when does the dollar peak? And the answer is it's pretty soon, because if it gets any stronger, the way to do the analysis is always think through the alternatives. Say, okay, why can't the dollar go to 120 on the index? Well, take the dollar to 120 on the index, you're going to have massive deflation in the U.S. economy. That's going to increase the debt to GDP ratio, and the U.S. is going to have a sovereign debt crisis. So that's why that can't happen, which means the dollar has to back off at some point. I think we're getting close to that point. So my point being, when you do scenario analysis, you don't just lock in on one thing. You look at all the alternatives and think of the reaction functions. How are things actually going to play out? So the scenario where, the banks are locked down, what I call in my new book, what I call ICE 9, you can't get money out of the banks. The ATMs are shut. The exchanges are shut. Maybe there's social unrest. Maybe there's problems in the power grid, like a really dire scenario. Man, that's when I want my gold more than ever. So I'm not, in that world, you're not looking to exchange it for some other store of value. You probably have the best store of value out there, along with fine art or land or, a couple other things. So I would say you don't want to exchange it. Mm-hmm. Now, you could spend it. Remember, people always find money. And the best example, go back to the Great Depression, go back to 1933. There were parts of the United States where there was no money. They were just out of money. The banks were closed. People were unemployed. The economy was flat on its back, and they had no money. What did people do? They made up money. They had, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, don't take any wooden nickels. Well, that comes from the Great Depression. People took wood, and they made circular wooden coins, and they stamped them with values, and they put the names of local merchants on them, and they put them into circulation. And you could go down to a drugstore and buy drugs with the wooden coins, and then the drugstore owner would pay his employee with the wooden coins. So they literally made money out of wood, and that's where the expression wooden nickel comes from. My point being, people will always come up with some kind of money. So people say, gee, why would I want gold? I can't eat it. My answer is, why would you want to eat it? Eat food, don't eat gold. They say, I can't spend it. My answer, when people say I can't spend it, my answer is, yes, you can. When you don't need it, you're not going to be able to spend it. But when you do need it, you will absolutely be able to spend it, because people will invent money. And if you got the real thing, you're going to be the richest guy in town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, to just add a little bit to that is that, we've always said that gold is gold and silver, really, money of last resort. So in a complete breakdown of ability to transfer money around, basically, there is always that. But keep in mind, one last thing I think, and maybe we'll end on this, is that keep in mind that these things are temporary events. They're not forever events. It's kind of like a hurricane will come in. It'll cause a lot of chaos and a lot of damage, but it doesn't last a week or a month or a year or 2 years. There's a period of time where that'll happen. But at the same time, the most important thing, I think, is how are you preserving your value for when it's over? Whoever has the most value is going to have the best options. And I think that's probably the most important thing to keep in mind. So with that, right. Jim, I want to thank you for your time. It's always an excellent discussion with you. Love to do these things. And I'm sure that based upon the feedback that we get from our listeners, it's very much appreciated. And with that, we're going to turn it over to John.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Jim Rickards. It's always a pleasure and an education having these conversations with the both of you. And most of all, thank you to our listeners for spending time with us today and hanging in there quite a little bit over time. Almost everybody did. That's always inspiring to see. So let me encourage you to follow Jim and Alex on Twitter. Jim's handle is @JamesG.Rickards. Alex's handle is @Stanczyk. So goodbye for now, and we look forward to joining you again soon. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to The Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards and Alex Stanczyk, presented by Physical Gold Fund. Recordings can be found at physicalgoldfund.com/podcasts. You can register there for news of upcoming interviews with Jim Rickards and other world-class thinkers.
Gold in US dollar terms was doing great. But if you lined up a 2-month chart of US dollar next to gold, you would see the pattern there is extremely obvious. The US dollar has been getting stronger and gold's been getting weaker. But the interesting thing is that US treasuries have been moving almost lockstep with gold. And so has the euro, JPY, the British pound, Swiss franc. These are all moving inverse to the US dollar. So what this tells us is that currencies around the world are actually just repositioning versus the dollar. And the U.S. gold price is a direct reflection of this. So I concur with what Jim says when the dollar weakens from this current strengthening cycle, and it has to. If it keeps getting stronger like this, we're going to be looking at serious emerging market crises, and it's got to reverse. And what I think is going to happen is as much of this starts to reverse, a lot of these things are also going to go in the other direction.
Well, thanks, Alex. Jim, I'd like to ask you just a brief thought about one other aspect of this election drama we've just lived through. Donald Trump campaigned as the champion of an unheard working class against the corruptions of the political and financial elite. Now, when you look at his cabinet choices, which assemble the wealthiest cabinet in U.S. history, and you look at his plans to reduce banking regulations, and you look at the continued reign of Goldman Sachs at the Treasury, can you actually see any daylight between Trump and the elites? And what do these hiring decisions mean for the markets looking forward?
Well, I actually can see some daylight, John, and I'm not as tough on this with regard to Trump as some of his critics or even some of his supporters. I think your question is probably more aimed at Trump's supporters. Are they disappointed or upset at some of these appointments? And do they feel it's the same old, and it's like that song by the Who, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, won't get fooled again. But I view it a little bit differently. First of all, I'm impressed with the caliber of the talent. So independent of the pedigree or where people worked once upon a time in their career, I think Trump is picking extremely talented, smart people, competent people for the cabinet. Now, I know that, Gary Cohn is moving from chief operating officer of Goldman Sachs to head of the National Economic Council, which is a very powerful job. You're actually in the White House. The National Economic Council is part of the senior staff of the White House. You have the ear of the president. When the president goes to G20, for example, it's about the global elites. And that's the subtitle of my new book. It's called The Road to Ruin, the Global Elite's Secret Plan for the Next Financial Crisis. When I talk about global elites, I'm really not talking about CEOs and bankers. I'm talking about policymakers. I'm talking about people like Christine Lagarde and David Lipton at the IMF, or Michael Froman, now the U.S. Trade Representative, formerly on the National Economic Council, or central bankers like Mario Draghi or Janet Yellen, or academics like Larry Summers or Ken Rogoff, or public intellectuals like Adair Turner and Anatole Koleski. Those are the people that I mean, or I refer to when I use the phrase global elites, because they're actually running the system, running the international monetary system, institutions like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, the Financial Stability Board, Sherpas in the G20 process, central bankers, finance ministers. That's the group that I'm talking about specifically. They're the ones who are advocating the SDR, who are getting ready for the next financial crisis. So, investment bankers are, they're important. They play an important role, but I really think of them as more about talent. And I think Trump is getting some very good talent. I get some very good advice. So I don't quite buy into the Goldman Sachs conspiracy theory. It's a powerful institution. It has a lot of problems. As far as Goldman Sachs itself as a company, what they do, that bears watching. But I think the individuals, you have to take them one at a time. As far as his other appointments, you got, as Donald Trump, as President-elect Trump would say, I've got my generals. General Flynn at the National Security Council, General Mattis at the Pentagon, and others who are getting various appointments in the intelligence community and other roles. They've talked about General Petraeus as perhaps having a role, Admiral Rogers, maybe for Director of National Intelligence. Not all these appointments have been announced, or not all these seats have been filled yet, but he's really relying on military people. And just a word there, I've been privileged to have a lot of exposure to the military, particularly senior officers, working with, majors and colonels and generals. I met a few 4-star generals, but I worked closely with 2-star and 3-star generals, brigadiers and major generals and lieutenant generals. And man, you would have a hard time finding a smarter group of individuals. I've worked with Wall Streeters, I've worked with Nobel Prize winners, I've worked with PhDs and academics, and I've worked with the military. And our senior National Economic Council and the head of it who prepare, his briefings and his positions on things like whether it's currency wars or bailout versus bail-in, et cetera, and also just directing economic policy in general. So of course, he was mentioned the chief operating officer of Goldman Sachs, probably the president's closest advisor outside of his children and son-in-law is Steve Bannon, who at one time worked at Goldman Sachs. And the Secretary of the Treasury is Steve Mnuchin, who also worked at Goldman Sachs. So you say, wait a second, isn't this a Goldman Sachs government? And I think the answer is, yeah, they may have worked there. Cohen's different. He actually is, he's Goldman Sachs to his DNA. But the other two, Bannon and Mnuchin, they worked there for part of their careers, but they moved on. Goldman, a lot of people come and go. Not everyone's there for life. You certainly get some great training. You build a great network. You get some skills, but you see them. Bannon went on, had a big career in Hollywood. He started doing media deals. He started his own investment bank, did media deals as an investment banker, made a ton of money he bought the rights to Seinfeld, the comedy show, and he bought it in, I think, after the first season, but it wasn't a big hit in the first season. Then he stepped in and bought the show. And then, of course, I guess it was the most popular TV show of the 1990s. Made a lot of money there. And Mnuchin also went out on his own as a private equity deal maker and bought some banks and made a lot of money that way. So, look, they're super talented guys. They made a ton of money. They're Wall Streeters, however you want to define it. But I don't really think of them as part of a deep, dark Goldman Sachs conspiracy where one firm controls the government. Look, Goldman Sachs is full of Republicans and Democrats. They do have a finger in every pie. I will say, everywhere you turn, you'll find a Goldman Sachs alumni. But, Neil Kashkari is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, worked there. Again, Bob Rubin, Secretary of the Treasury during the Democratic Clinton administration, Hank Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury during the Republican Bush administration, were both former heads of Goldman Sachs. They tend to be everywhere, but, they tend to be quite talented. There are Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals. So I don't see Goldman Sachs as this homogeneous, malevolent force, particularly if you haven't been there your whole career. Cohen has, so he's maybe a little bit different category. But the others, they were there for a while, but they did a lot else in their career. So I view it as really more a question of talented. When I talk to military officers, I'm talking about the top tier. These men and women, they've got they've got PhDs, they speak 5 languages, they've got 2 master's degrees, they've got all that education, plus they've been, on active duty in 5 continents. When you're an area commander, you run one, Central Command or Africa Command or European Command, you're like a super ambassador. You deal with your peers, you deal with heads of state, you deal with ministers of defense and other senior cabinet officials, CEOs in the places you go. So they're super competent, but they also have a culture. The military culture is, can do. Never complain, get it done, mobilize whatever resources you need. They don't make excuses between each other. They have a very direct, very blunt style. That's kind of military culture. There's a lot to admire there. So, people like Wilbur Ross, I've met Wilbur Ross a few times, very nice guy, looks super successful, super shrewd deal maker. So I look around at this cabinet, what I see is not a group of elites. Look, I guess if you're a billionaire and you belong to certain clubs, you're part of the elite, but I define it a little more narrowly. My definition of elites really runs to like-minded people using really bad economic models to run the financial system to off a cliff. But as far as the others are concerned, I'm looking at the Trump cabinet. What I see actually is a lot of talent, a lot of smart people, and I don't see the conspiracy that some others see. So it's nice fodder for the websites and the people who like to use, what do they call Goldman Sachs? The vampire squid. I guess that was Matt Taibbi, Rolling Stone, came up with that phrase. I don't quite, Goldman's a powerful institution. I have no illusions about it. They do have a finger in every pie, but I don't quite buy the vampire squid theory, and I don't think it's a conspiracy, and I think he's got some very talented people.
Well, thanks, Jim. And in particular, it's a very helpful distinction you made about how precisely you're defining the financial elites. And now, Alex, I'm sure you have many questions from our listeners. We've got a little time left, and let's use it to hear those questions.
Okay, sounds great. So we did have a lot more material planned for this discussion, including the situation that's going on in India. And I'm just going to very, very briefly touch on that. For those of you who don't know, there was a demonetization that was declared on November 8th by India's Prime Minister. It has created a tremendous amount of turmoil. The country uses almost 98% of its transactions are done in cash. So this has been a huge issue. We referred to this in previous discussions.
Welcome to part 2 of the latest podcast from the Gold Chronicles with Jim Rickards and Alex Stanczyk, presented by Physical Gold Fund.
And Alex, of course, you watch all this and the markets, the equity and bond markets, through the lens of physical gold. And looking back on recent events, how do you see what's been happening?
Sure. I've got a couple of views on this. And one is that I'd just like to remind everybody listening to the discussion is that, there are times where gold moves quite a bit and sometimes people get a little concerned about the price. But I would remind people that the prices that we see are prices based upon currency crosses versus gold. And what I mean by that is that gold doesn't do anything. I saw this article the other day. It was a news article, and the headline said, "Trump loves gold, but gold doesn't love Trump." And I thought to myself, that is really one of the dumbest headlines I think I've ever heard, because gold doesn't love anybody. It's an inert material. It doesn't have a sort of a fancy for certain things. And my point is that gold is just gold. An ounce, troy ounce of gold is a troy ounce of gold now, and it will be 1,000 years from now. It will be in the United States or in Germany or in any other country. It doesn't matter. It doesn't move and it doesn't go anywhere and it doesn't do anything. It just is. So when you're seeing prices expressed in US dollars for gold or British pounds or euros, really what you're seeing is fluctuations in those currency values against gold. So listening to what Jim was saying, I think he's totally right. I think that the words I would use to describe the situation is temporarily over-optimistic. And from my view, equities and the US dollar have been getting much stronger, but for all the reasons Jim mentioned and possibly a couple more. So you've got this narrative going on about how the US economy is going into the future. But we have to also look around the world, and combined with sort of the turbulence that we're seeing in the EU right now and around the world, this is all contributing to US dollar strength. So these moves really are all US dollar strength based. And there's a lot of things that push on the price of gold. And on occasion, the US dollar has like sort of the strongest push, and that's exactly what's been happening. Even in the last 2 days, the US dollar is up strongly, while every major currency in the world, including gold, is down versus the dollar. So if you back it up even further, if you go back to the beginning of October,